Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Eve M. Hall, President and CEO of the Milwaukee Urban League. Thank you for joining our State of Black America MKE, Intersecting Employment and Entrepreneurship, Creating an Inclusive and Equitable Pipeline. Today's panel will explore the cross-sections of employment and entrepreneurship and the impact on jobs and the economic growth of our community. After our panel discussion, our attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions through the chat box, so please make sure you enter your questions. Our local town hall started last year after the 44th Annual State of Black America report was released by the National Urban League, an annual report since 1976 that reports on the status of Black Americans in all the major cities. 90 Urban League affiliates like ourselves exist, and we are located in 36 states and the District of Columbia. According to Forbes, American workers are quitting their jobs more than any other time in the past 2 decades, as employees rethink their passion and purpose and their relationship to how they make a living. Unemployment rates continue to be higher for Black and brown workers compared to white workers, with unemployment most rampant for women of color. For Black and brown business owners, during the first 2 months of the health crisis, Black businesses plummeted by 41% and Latino businesses by 26% compared to 17% of white entrepreneurs. As the country reopens, 37% of Black entrepreneurs fear they may not survive the next 3 months, according to The Guardian and the survey by Small Business Majority. We talk constantly about building inclusive and equitable pipelines in both spaces, employment and entrepreneurship. Today's panel will share what that means. Their experiences are extensive and impressive. All are change agents in their roles. In respect of time, however, we have provided their bios on our website for your review. We are fortunate today to have Molson Coors Beverage Company as our sponsor, a company that has been a longtime member of the Milwaukee Urban League Board and a consistent supporter of the league, both locally and nationally. Thank you, Molson Coors. And now let's meet our panel for today. Representing Molson Coors is Stephen Brown, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Shaitania Brown, President and CEO of Employ Milwaukee Incorporated. Giacomo Faluca, Chair and CEO of Palermo's Pizza. Nancy Hernandez, President of the Hispanic Collaborative. Wendy Bauman, President and CVO of the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, better known as WIBIC. And last but not least, Ugo Naraguarocha, President of Diamond Disc International. Stephen Brown will now greet us with why it was important for Molson Coors to be today's sponsor. Stephen?
Dr. Hall, thank you and thank your staff for putting on today's event. You know, Molson Coors has been a longtime partner with the Milwaukee Urban League for more than 2 decades, supporting the career development program to help build job skills in Milwaukee, as well as sponsoring this series of the State of Black America, and of course the Black and White Ball. We're proud to have our own Yolanda Seltzer, our Director of People Development, as an active board member of the Milwaukee Urban League. You know, the timing of today's program is fantastic for us because we announced yesterday the renewal of our Project Justice Initiative. That is us investing $1.5 million into 33 organizations focused on equity, empowerment, community building, and justice across North America. What that means to Milwaukee is that we get to invest in great organizations like the American Black Holocaust Museum, the Northwest Side Partners, and the Wisconsin Equal Justice Fund. We're committed to supporting economic empowerment and workforce development by investing in the next generation of entrepreneurs, small business owners, and of course, Milwaukee talent. We're early investors in the African American Chamber of Wisconsin capital campaign to build the Legacy Center, and we serve as a hub for the local, where they serve as a hub for Black entrepreneurs for years to come. This year, through Project Justice, we're also able to support 2 great organizations committed to our city, my city where I grew up at, the Sherman Phoenix Center and the Milwaukee Fellows. At the Sherman Phoenix Center, we provide matching funds to launch their newly established foundation through the Phoenix Effect video series. And I encourage you to view it and support what they're doing. And then lastly, Molson Coors has been committed to ensuring that great talent, the next generation of leaders, are not only born and raised in Milwaukee, but they keep their talent here through investing in the Milwaukee Fellows Program. We're committed to the city. I'm committed to the city, and I'm really excited about today's program, but also today's discussion. Back to you, Dr. Hall.
Thank you, Stephen. And wow, what an incredible, incredible investment that Molson Coors is making. And we're so proud that as a native of Milwaukee that you're at the helm around diversity and inclusion for Molson Coors. So let's get this show on the road. Panelists, let's begin with this first question, which is a part of the title of today's program. How can employment and entrepreneurship work together to drive the economy post-COVID? Now, panelists, you'll have 2 minutes each to answer the question. So let's begin with you, Stephen.
Yeah, listen, it's probably tied to what I said at kicking off today, that as an employer, we have the opportunity to really not only invest in our companies, but also the companies that are around us. And so, you think about that we're building talent that will go off and do great things for employers, but also do great things for the city and for their, for their businesses. And so I think we just owe it to ourselves to make sure that we really continue to invest in what's happening. And through this really past 18 months, what we have figured out is that not only do small businesses, entrepreneurs need help, but we also recognize they've closed, that they're struggling. And I do really think that we are blessed to be a thriving organization that we have to make sure that we're giving back. And that's our time, talent, and really our overall commitment.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaitania Brown, over there at Employ Milwaukee, what does that look like for entrepreneurship and employment?
Thank you, Dr. Hall. So here at Employ Milwaukee, what the pandemic has taught us is we're resilient. We're a resilient city. We all learned how to pivot. And so people are actually learning how to pivot. And Employ Milwaukee has been a long supporter of entrepreneurship opportunities. It just became really at the forefront since the pandemic. People have had opportunity to think about career changes, as well as when we're looking at our young people. Part of our youth development work incorporates entrepreneurship as one of the 14 program elements that young people through our programs can receive services. And we've seen a huge uptick in interest from our young people, as well as many of our dislocated workers who were laid off during the pandemic. And so we have been looking at how do we expand those partnerships. We've done some work with WIBIC on the reentry front. Many of our committees have been having conversations around how do we do specialized training to gear more veterans and more individuals who may have been formerly incarcerated to entrepreneurship opportunities, and incorporating that into the work that we do. We're also looking at making sure that we create opportunity and resources for folks who may not be able to quit their jobs right away, but have an interest and have begun that process of thinking about how do I go into business for myself. And so through our virtual platform that we're working to create, it will allow people to access our services once they get off work. So we're looking at how do we add a different mode of service delivery methods to our current programming so that people can still attach themselves to online resources, online training, to do what they need to do to change in this entrepreneurship sphere, as well as making it a requirement in our youth development front that programming leads more young people to understand the necessity, understand what goes into becoming your own entrepreneur. And then on the employment front, we're changing how we do business altogether and expanding our industry-led partnerships, which we've seen tried and true, they work. And it's become really important as we look to get more people back to work, is making sure we have that train to employment pipeline through these industry partnerships.
Wonderful. Giacomo, what's happening at Palermo's Pizza?
Thank you, Dr. Hall. I think it's a great question about, employment and entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur, and that's how I was raised and grown. And I think it first begins as a company, Palermo's, being open to entrepreneurial opportunities within our employees. And that does occur. However, I think because of our involvement in the community, myself and my sons, Nick and Jasper, I think paying attention to the community around us to where we can get involved in entrepreneurial opportunities. So Sherman Phoenix is an example where I personally have been involved financially with the Sherman Phoenix, as well as coming alongside myself and my sons and even other business owners to mentor some of those entrepreneurs, and whether it's in the Sherman Phoenix or other opportunities. And then thirdly, I think there's an opportunity for our company to invest in some of those companies. And we have that occurring rather soon. And so I think it's just being aware and then being involved in those opportunities when they present themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Giacomo. And I know you personally have been very involved in the community. Nancy, you are doing a lot of things, and you're an entrepreneur as well. So tell us what you're thinking.
Thanks, Eve. And I appreciate the question. I think these two are the cornerstone, I think, of a good economic recovery. And so I appreciate that. If we think about the role that entrepreneurship plays in the upward mobility of a community, the leadership, the investment into neighborhoods, the jobs, the economic impact, I think it's kind of clear why entrepreneurship is an important part of the equation in equitable recovery for our communities. Employment is important because Latinos and African Americans have been instrumental in recovery from recessions dating back to 1948, participating in the labor force at the highest levels. So this will be true for our post-COVID economy as well, and ensuring that we understand how the demographics, changing demographics, the digitalization, acts of God as we've experienced, and even our own nation's history have evolved us today, preparing all sectors of our labor force for participation at that highest level is not only good policy, it's at the heart of equitable economics.
Thank you, Nancy. Wendy, how do you see that intersection taking place?
Good. Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Hall, Eve, if I may, for including me and WIBIC on this and in this important dialogue, especially with the co-panelists. I know all of them. Steve, I don't know you as well, but everybody else I've known for some time. So thank you. Two comments that I would say, they're both a bit pithy comments, and I will share a little bit about them. The first one is a wise man, works at the Housing Authority of the City of Milwaukee, Tony Perez. On the back of his business card, he has this great expression, and it's what works best is work itself. And I'll comment on that from the workforce development side. On the WIBIC side, or on the entrepreneurial side, we've often entitled proposals and briefings and discussion, our favorite job title is business owner. So what works best is work itself. My comment here is that all jobs are good. And some jobs are entry jobs, and those are good. They're good for our youth in high school. They're good for younger individuals, perhaps while they're in college and working and going to school at the same time. So all of those jobs, all of that work is good work. And what works best is work itself, a job. Now there's a continuum. As we continue on in our life and gain a few more years, we want to be down more that path of higher earning jobs, industry jobs, all of those kind of jobs that really work. And ideally it's career, it's a vocation, it's a calling, it's the kind of work that you do. What do you do? I am this, I am that, I work in this field and that field. And generally as you go on, you get higher wage pieces. But I want to be clear that some basic entry-level jobs are very appropriate for many individuals coming into the workforce, or maybe even coming back into the workforce with some transition jobs. So what works best is work itself. Now, the next piece is job title, business owner. So maybe at some point in your life, or maybe from the beginning, and I love Shaitania saying that she is going to require for the youth entrepreneurial training. I want to be there. I love that. I generally think it's awareness building and introduction, but she's going to require it. I love it. because exposure is important. We don't know what we're not exposed to. So job title business owner. For some individuals, supposedly 17% of the population of the United States is thinking of starting a business. They're a corporate executive right now. There's somebody finishing high school or college. There's somebody that are in a position, but they have this idea for this business. And so we think that's wonderful. So you're creating your own job. And perhaps through growth and development, you're creating other jobs. Self-employment is a win. At WIBIC, we are definitely behind Gazelle companies, but that's not our goal. Part-time businesses, adding wealth for that individual or that family unit in that community is great for us. Self-employment, creating your own job and being self-sustainable is also really important. So those are just sort of be my introductory comments as we begin to dialogue.
Thank you. Great points, Wendy. And Ugo, finish us off in this particular area.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Hall and the Milwaukee Urban League for putting this very necessary and meaningful discussion. When you talk about the importance of entrepreneurship, especially a thriving, diverse business community, as everyone knows, that's something that I preach all the time as far as the importance of a thriving, diverse business community. I think there's a huge role that's often overlooked of what small businesses do for employment. You know, when you look at the majority of jobs and employment opportunities are normally created by small jobs. You know, if you look at every small job, if they created 1 or 2 employment opportunities, it literally would erase the deficit as far as unemployment. So when I say that right now, to me, is a unique opportunity where every industry has changed. And with every industry changing, there's a couple of things that are huge in this time right now as far as innovation and safety. And when you look at all the industries, healthcare, food and beverage, when you look at entrepreneurship as far as being able to create innovative changes, it really creates unique opportunities for businesses to flourish. And as these businesses flourish and grow, also creating employment opportunities. So I think there's a huge role to play. I think education, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the role of education, whether it's your area technical colleges or your long-term educational institutions, having more of an emphasis on entrepreneurial activity and development, and also the corporations being able to have more of a role in partnership with the educational organizations to point out the entrepreneurial opportunities also, I think is another large area of opportunity.
Thank you. So when I kind of reflect on what all of you have said, I heard Shaitania really speak to the youth development and training piece, Giacomo to investment and involvement, Nancy around entrepreneurship being that cornerstone in the economy, Wendy with all jobs are good, work itself is what works, and then Ugo speaking about a thriving business community and the importance of small businesses and their impact on employment. All excellent points, thank you. So let's go to the next question, panelists. How do we diversify the pipeline in a meaningful way? And what is your company or organization doing to address this? This time we're going to begin with Ugo. Ugo?
Well, thank you. And thanks again for, again, such a great question. When you look at diversity, I think it starts real simply. It starts at the top down. Diversity has to be something that is on the CEO's dashboard. So when the CEO is looking at their success, the success of their organization or their corporation, whether it's a year or 2 years or 5 years down the road, that metric of diversity should be on that dashboard as far as how they're not just measuring their performance and their success, but also how they're looking at as far as their compensation. So I think when you look at, first of all, being on the top, going down, I think secondly, also when you look at, to me, when you look at diversity, it's not just about who you hire, but it's also about who you do business with. I think those are two things that really define the importance of diversity. And when I mention that is, again, pivoting back to diverse business community, when you have a thriving diverse business community, that also attracts diverse talent. I think, and it also retains diverse talent also. So I think when you look at how the city of Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin, how we rank to our peers, that it's not only as far as rankings, as far as how we're doing with worst place for African Americans to raise a family or to raise a business. But I don't think it's not a coincidence that it's also, when you look at home ownership for African Americans, we also are ranking, we're lagging against our counterparts. When you look at the number of diverse businesses that are thriving, we're also lagging to our diverse counterparts. So I mentioned all to say, again, having the CEOs top down looking at that as a metric, and also who they're doing business with. Again, these are two thriving things that, to me, are able to change diversity.
Thank you. Wendy.
Back to the previous question and just piggyback off of something that Ugo shared too. He commented about micro and small businesses. And really the statistic here is that if all micro businesses would grow enough to employ one more individual, we would be totally at full employment in the United States. So micro businesses in Wisconsin comprise 85% of all the businesses in the state. And a micro business is basically a business that employs roughly a dozen or so individuals. So those really, the spotlight was shown during the time of the health crisis, the economic crisis, and the social justice crisis on the importance of these businesses, of these small businesses, from retail, small professional businesses, and all of that. So very, very, very important in terms of workforce for a city, for an urban community, a rural community, and really our state and our nation. In terms of this next question, I think it's a classic line, but I have to use it, in that you have to be intentional. This isn't anything about being casual. You need to be intentional, and you need to have a plan. That's like our favorite word at WIBIC, having a business plan. You need to have a plan around that, around diversification, around looking at issues about this. In addition, I would comment that ideally, at least at WIBIC, what we believe is that our, like Ugo said from the top, our board of directors, our loan committee, our staff needs to reflect who we care about and our clients. 88% of WIBIC's clients in greater Milwaukee are people of color, and about 65% statewide. That's significant. Our staff is diverse, and it needs to be diverse in a large sense of the way, as is our board, as is our loan committee. So again, reflecting the clients you serve, in my mind, is a good practice and positive. And third, then I would comment in terms of what WIBIC is doing specifically. We came out of the women's economic empowerment movement. So that was always centered, and it's still in our name. From day one, we focused our efforts on women, people of color, specifically African-American, Hispanic, Latinx entrepreneurs and business owners, on lower wealth individuals. At WIBIC, again, tongue in cheek, we call those individuals pre-rich. And in the last 10 years, a focus on veterans. In all cases, there are isms that still remain. In all cases, there is inequity. In all cases, there's an unlevel playing field. So at WIBIC, and the good partners on this panel today, we're trying to level that playing field and try to provide the resources so there is a level playing field. Specifically at WIBIC, diversity, equity, inclusion, the new buzzwords, everybody's got a chief of diverse equity inclusion. We don't have a chief, but that's always been part of WIBIC. That's always been in our DNA. We're trying to take it a step up, and we're framing it around cultural competency. Far more than only still the gaps and issues around white and black in this city and in this nation, and white and brown, but around gender, where there is inequity, around lower wealth, around age, around what Chaitanya talked about, individuals who were formerly incarcerated and now re-entry. So, and veterans also. Veterans also is another big piece where there's a very big unlevel playing field. So we're taking it a little broader. Our plan is around being a culturally organization, culturally competent organization. We are looking at a third party to come in and poke us a little bit. How are we doing with what Ugo talked about, supplier development? I sort of think it's good because we don't touch anybody that's not a WIBIC client when we buy anything. But how are we doing around that? How are we doing around retention of our team members? All around. How are we doing around recruitment? Are we doing the best job we can? We think we are, but I'm sure we can improve. How are we doing in reflecting this larger sense around working with Ledger's team members, working with aligned partners, and working the rest? So we're really poking at this. And in some ways, we're going slow to go right, not just to zap somebody in terms of some kind of role and look at X, Y, or Z. And I see what a lot of companies are doing. And, I don't want to be negative here, But it's not just about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's really about a bigger piece. WIBIC's taking on that bigger piece. It's part of us already, but I know we can even improve further.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Nancy, you have really been involved in this community around equity, equality in the Hispanic community, but also collaboratively across Black and Brown communities. Your thoughts, please.
Thanks, Eve. But first, you put me behind two very smart people, so it's not surprising. I'm going to echo some of the things that they talked about intentionality and about what does the top look like. But I'll add a different spin to it. You know, I think that we need to think about two ends of that labor force spectrum. First, I think we need to think about our college graduates. Are they reaching their potential, or are they underemployed or underpromoted? And how can greater financial support, internships, and company policy help improve those outcomes? And on the other side of it, we also need to recognize that occupational segregation is unfortunately alive and well. And our Latino and African American labor force is too concentrated in lower earning and lower in demand jobs. So the Hispanic Collaborative is interested in changing this dynamic. We've implemented training opportunities in in-demand fields such as healthcare and IT, partnering with existing training programs to create a scalable model via a cohort program that we think can have an impact on the labor force makeup today, not 4 years from now. We want to see changes today. We have cohort training going on right now in cybersecurity. And that's not, an individual group of Latinos going through cybersecurity training, but a team of Latinos in a cohort, and that increases their support and their success, and it reduces the levels of the unfamiliar and the risk for the individuals going through it. And we're soon going to have one in healthcare. So that's a little bit about what we're doing on this front. But definitely echoing what Ugo and Wendy said, even a little differently. There has to be intentionality here, and we have to look at, are our Black and Brown individuals making it through the top ranks so that they can help bring others along and change policy and change systems.
Thank you, Nancy. Excellent. Giacomo, from where you sit, what do you see?
Well, first of all, I see a wonderful looking panel and host. So I'm looking at myself in the mirror here and I'm thinking, boy, you all look so great. Secondly, I want to borrow what Wendy did, going back to the previous question. I feel like a political panelist here, but I think I want to emphasize another point on the previous question about mentorship. And just very briefly, I'm not a college graduate. So for me, seeking other folks in business that were a little farther ahead is just really an important point to gaining understanding in an entrepreneurial situation. And learning from another business person or another person, I think is just so key. And so I want to emphasize mentoring, coming alongside someone who you can either mentor or be a mentor to, or be a mentee. So that's my last point on that first question. Regarding the diversity pipeline and what we are doing about it, I think since the events of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the others that have followed, we as an organization, while we didn't know what to do, we decided to start. We started a group back last summer, and we called it the Building Bridges Group. But really what we started with is just asking our employees questions. Starting off with questions. How do you feel about what's going on? And we spent probably a couple of months. We would meet once a month, and we invited all our employees to join in what they ended up calling it is the Building Bridges Group, essentially the diversity, equity, inclusion. And so it was just really, it was great, and it was emotional to see the employees actually break down and to understand the impact of what has happened and what has happened in the past, but not only what had happened recently. And I think from the questions, we began to say, okay, so what are we going to do about it as a company? And they decided actually to see how can we serve our fellow employees and how can we serve the community. And along with that, we've invited guest speakers from African-American organizations, churches, Latinx, LGBTQ, and all of those was just really important for us to reach out and to get their perspective. So I think, and the group where the group is going, and I don't think we have all of the those questions answered, but here is I think what we're looking at is as it relates to our suppliers, as it relates to our hiring practices, those are areas that we are working on as well. What does that look like from all levels of management, supplier diversity, job diversity as it relates to the positions? So those are the things that we are doing as an organization. And I think it's really made an impact. At the senior level, we are involved, but largely allow the employee group to manage and run this part of our company. So that's what we're doing as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Giacomo. Shaitania, that diversity pipeline, I'm sure Employ Milwaukee is doing some unique things.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. I share the sentiment of my colleagues when they talk about intentionality. 5 years ago, I couldn't have had the types of conversations that I'm having now with employers related to looking at individuals who traditionally didn't fit the mold of who they hired. And, truly, if we want to diversify the talent pipeline in a meaningful way, we need to stop focusing on short-term solutions and instead invest in longer-term solutions. While they may take more time and more resources, we know tried and true that they result in real substantive change. And some of the things that Employ Milwaukee is doing on that front is really strengthening those partnerships. We've had many employers come to us during this last year wanting to have conversations that, like I said, I couldn't have had with them 5 years ago related to what can we do differently? How, what are some things we should change? I've been invited to work groups such as the Waukesha Business Alliance to have these similar conversations with them about how do we get more people. And my thing is, guys, let's not keep talking about it. Let's be about it. If you truly, truly, truly want to make change, then you have to, from what was said before, from the top down, make sure that's the mode of the business of the organization, that you stand by what it is that you're telling to the community. And, we're in pursuit of additional funding, making sure that we have adequate resources to skill up people, make sure there's resources for disenfranchised workers. All that we do, we're incorporating trauma-informed care for the training providers, but also for the employers. Employ Milwaukee is training its staff. We've been working with Milwaukee County and have a partnership with St. A to provide trauma-informed care for employers with an emphasis on retention. Because again, this is all about making sure you have longer-term solutions, because we keep ending up in this same old space. And I know many employers are wanting right now to have a short-term fix because they need people. But at the same time, should we get in another situation, we end up back here. And so that's why it can't be a one and done fix. It has to be a continuum, and it has to have longer solutions for what we're doing. And we're also working on the policy front. How do we work with those to create policies that will help to remove some of those barriers to those people coming out of correctional institutions and for individuals who oftentimes have barriers to meeting the basic needs for themselves, let alone some of the needs of the employment. So really, it's very intentional. It has to be intentional. It has to come from the top down, as many of my colleagues have said. And Employ Milwaukee wants to be at any table who's having this discussion, because we cannot be a one and done. It cannot be just for today. We have to think about If this is something we really truly want to see change, meaningful change, we have to have longer term solutions.
Thank you, Shaitania. Stephen, wrap us up in this particular section on diversity pipeline.
Yeah, listen, this has been, I think it was Nancy who said you have 2 speakers before her, and I have to now amplify. I have 5 speakers ahead of me that said so much. I want to think about this as not only the first part of the pipeline, but how do you make sure that you convert that pipeline to real jobs that is a livelihood and able to make you grow both your community and your people. So I was, and the other words I want to use, and I'm going to steal them, but we've used them in an ongoing way here, is whatever you're doing, it should be sustainable, it should be intentional, it should have a level of accountability. And so we put our roadmap, our diversity, inclusion, equity roadmap together as a 3-year roadmap, and very, very intentionally talked about how we want to grow our pipeline, 25%, increasing our pipeline, 25% of people of color. And while that may not be achieved in 3 years, we recognize that you have to march towards that. Somehow you have to make sure that you really are being very intentional about what are you putting in place to not only build the pipeline, but convert that pipeline to real talent. When you think about what has been, representation matters. And so it's not only just about hiring them, but what you have in place in your organization that will allow them to grow, allow them to stay, and frankly, invite other people to come here with them. When you think about diversity suppliers, who are we using to ensure that we're building a pipeline, not only internally, but also within the community itself? Then we have to take a very strong look at it, and we have done this in regards to what has been barriers to perhaps maybe prevent people from being part of that pipeline. So we're taking a very strong look at this. All jobs, I heard Jack mention this, do all jobs require a college degree? In some cases, we just simply said yes, without really saying, is that really factual? So we're actually taking a look at removing some of that requirement around education and saying that experience does matter. And so we will leverage that piece. What parts are we playing in regards to the pipeline to skill up talent, to retrain talent? And then ultimately, you also think about, the internships that we're having. But then when we think about the hiring that we have within our breweries, for example, really kind of ensuring that we use contract workers to convert them to full-time hires and making that pipeline stick that way as well. So it's, we paused last year. And by the way, last year, things were not, there was not anything new that happened last year, but it got old. And I think the comments in regards to, we just can't have this a moment in time. How do we pull all the way this through? So we brought in an external partner to look at our processes from beginning to end and saying what prevents people from advancing through our organization, what prevents people to coming into our organization. So you have to be, again, intentional. You have to be really accountable for the changes you have to make. If you're only doing this to satisfy a part of your voices, then you're going to miss those other voices. And so we are just being very intentional about who do we want to be as not only an employer of choice, an employer within the Milwaukee area, but again, one that you will say, listen, Molson Coors is doing things that I want to be a part of. Molson Coors are things that they're investing beyond the employees that are in that building, but they're doing it for the community. So building that pipeline needs to be very intentional, and it has to be representation across the organization. If you're only bringing people in at the entry level, which by the way, are meaningful jobs, but if you only bring them there and you're not checking and look at your middle management, your senior manager, and your boards, then you're not looking at the whole process here. And so the intentional pipeline means all the way through a pipeline, both from your suppliers and also to your employment.
Wow, excellent points, colleagues. So let me summarize a little bit of what's been said. Ugo spoke to everything really starts at the top down, having to have a metrics in place for measuring what is being done, and that it's also a combination of who you hire and then who you do business with. Wendy spoke about micro businesses, their impact in terms of growth, and that hiring just one person, which was a spillover from what Ugo mentioned, and the abilities for entrepreneurs to have an impact on employment. When we heard from Nancy, she spoke about kind of the two ends of labor. The college grads, are they underemployed? Are they underpromoted? Pushing more towards internships, and just also the occupational segregation in terms of low-income jobs and kind of dead-end jobs. Giacomo, he emphasized mentorship, the importance of learning from other business owners. You don't necessarily have to be a college grad, but it's how you learn and feed off of each other on what's best. And just his own work internally around building bridges and beginning with a survey within his own company. Shaitania, talking about investing in long-term, that these are not short-term solutions, and the importance of partnerships, and also just a new dialogue that has been taking place that I think we're all experiencing, quite frankly, as a result of George Floyd, conversations that would never have occurred in the past. And then the trauma-informed care I thought was very important. And then Stephen, speaking about the pipeline to real jobs. It's bigger than just a pipeline, but are we going to real jobs? Are we going to jobs that are really about a good living and livelihood? The whole emphasis on sustainability, intentionality, accountability, and then going beyond entry-level jobs. One of the threads that I heard all of you speak about, though, is intentionality. You spoke about policy and accountability. So all of those three are really important in making a dent in the equitable and inclusive pipeline. So our next question, something new is happening in our country. With the new great resignation wave, quote unquote, national surveys are showing that workers are leaving or thinking about leaving their jobs in record rates. What is your perspective on this new post-pandemic trend, and how is it impacting the work of your organization, Shaitania, and your companies, Stephen and Giacomo? So Shaitania, I'll begin with you. The impact on Employ Milwaukee with this resignation wave that's occurring.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for that question. I see it as kind of two tracks, and I have to give this example so people can understand my first track. So there's a wave of folks, and in particular, I believe you mentioned it, Dr. Hall, where women, in particular African-American women, have truly been impacted by the pandemic. Many of those women worked in jobs that were in hospitality or retail. And so a lot of them lost their jobs. And then childcare. Now it's time to go back to work. And many moms, who are oftentimes the ones who make the decisions, or in many instances, single moms for their children, and having to make a choice between work and their children. And we know, based on some early reports that we've seen, 1 in 4 daycares went down during the pandemic, and they have not returned. And I was in a store, CVS, really quick, and a young mother was talking to a coworker who worked at the store, and was talking about she had to be at work the next day at 2 o'clock and did not have childcare, a babysitter, until 2:30. And she was grappling with, do I bring my child to work and hide him under the desk until the person can get here at 2:30 to pick up my child? Or do I call in and suffer the consequences of calling in because I don't have childcare? And many women are being faced with that, which is impacting their ability to return to work, which is also impacting their thought process around, do I even return to that type of work? Because I have other situations that are creating barriers to me to return to work. And there's not a whole lot of resources or resolutions at this time to address that. And so in my conversation with employers, I'm saying, what degree are you willing to be flexible? And then that other track that, there's the group of folks who've had this opportunity to think about, do I want to return back to the work that I was doing beforehand? When the world was moving and everything was up and moving very rapidly, and you had, many things to think about, people was work, work, work. This year and plus has given people a lot of time to reflect on their work-life balance. And some are opting to just totally rethink what they want to pursue. Do I go back to that work, or do I truly pursue, take my retirement and go after becoming, whether it be an entrepreneurship or investing in my education and going in a route where it will yield me a job that I don't necessarily have to go back into the office. I can work remote, or I can also work remote and not even live in the state of the job. So we're seeing lots and lots of that, and just really trying to understand what does that mean for this new realm that we find ourselves in, this workforce development space, and how do we continue to work to address that? Because it's new for all of us. We haven't seen, and there's two options, and I really want people to be aware of that. There's the option of choice, and there's the option of not a choice that people are faced with. And so with employee, like I said, we want to be intentional in how we continue to service people and not do business as usual, and thinking outside the box as to how we offer virtual offerings so that people can skill up and still be able to support themselves during the daytime, and skill up with opportunity, with training that they can receive after work or on the weekends, or, outside of that. Also looking at, employers will need to be creative and think outside the box. We've seen increases in wages, and I'm very thankful to those employers who are getting it, that people have choices. And they've increased wages, and including bonuses and offering flexibility. And again, really looking at how can we accommodate the workers if we truly want these workers to come and work for us. Because again, there's two tracks of people that we've seen who come that we're working with, and there's the track of choice and the track of no choice.
Wow, thank you, Shaitanya. Two tracks, that's an interesting analysis. The impact on Palermo's, Giacomo, talk to us.
Well, first of all, Shaitanya, I love your perspective, and you are so right on. I think, we do a lot of work with employee engagement, understanding we want an engaged workforce, right? I think we all want to be in a job that we love, and we want to be able to love the folks that work in the business. And I think it comes with, having that mutual alignment. And I think what's important is, as we look at the enterprise, what is needed for the enterprise, combined with what is the employee situation. And I think that's just really critical. As we look at returning to work, and we look at all the things that Shaitanya mentioned, evaluating the job, pausing to say, is this what I really want to do? Considering the family situation, childcare is really, really big. And then trying to come together to say, okay, how can we compromise? How can we understand the needs of the organization and the needs of the employees, and how can we work together to create an environment that suits us all? And that's what we're looking at. But I think it's just having that dialogue is really what it comes down to. Having that dialogue and trying to talk it through, because this is so new, and we're learning so much about each other in a way that we haven't had to before. And then taking those learnings and now saying, what's the best way to move forward? So that's what I would say on this subject.
Right, thank you, Giacomo, for those insights. Molson Coors, Stephen, what's happening there?
Yeah, I'm going to maybe ask the question a little bit differently. I just realized that the last 18 months have been really tough on people. And the amount of trauma people are dealing with is real. And so when we think about why people are leaving, I think you have to ask the question, why are they leaving? And if you're not dealing with that trauma, then I'm not sure that that shouldn't be addressed first. I also think the conversation that was just had in regards to what matters, I think through this past 18 months, people have decided that there may be things that matter, that perhaps their job is not fulfilling for them, that the people they work with aren't the people they want to work with, that it's not healthy for them to work there. So as a citizen of Milwaukee, as an employer, Molson Coors, I do think that we have to ask that question: are we dealing with the trauma to allow people to get through this time period that while they're not able to maybe work based on childcare, flexibility, readiness to come back, are we dealing with those issues? I think sometimes what are we trying to solve for? And I think, just solve for workers, we're not dealing with everything that worker has been experienced over the last 18 months. We're missing a real opportunity. I will say, fortunately, we have not experienced too much of attrition, and we haven't experienced too many people not accepting our job offers. But when we do, it is much more around the flexibility. Do they feel safe coming back into this environment? That is either one, because of COVID, two, as it relates to even the racial tension that's around there. But I just want us to not lose track that we have real people dealing with trauma, and in some cases they're pausing and saying, I need to deal with me, and I figure out my economic piece, at some point. But now I need to deal with a healthy me before I can move forward.
Great observations. Shaitania, you talked about the child care, and that is a huge barrier. We keep hearing about it, quite frankly, through the Urban League. The flexibility of employers being so important. Love that the two tracks, that people do have to be aware that some people have choices and some people do not. They are up against the wall. And then not doing business as usual for skill up and training. Giacomo, you talked about compromise and an understanding where, the employer and employees really need to come together for the good of both. Companies need to continue to operate, but employees need to have a quality of life and be able to take care of their day-to-day needs and concerns. And then Stephen, you mentioned trauma, and that has really become that buzzword as well. Regarding these last 18 months and why are people leaving, what matters to them, and are we really dealing with the issues of trauma? So all good points by you three, thank you. Let's move now. Nancy and Ugo, you are both entrepreneurs, and Wendy, you work with entrepreneurs. So what are the implications for entrepreneurs in the Great Resignation trend? And we'll start with our two entrepreneurs, Nancy and Ugo. And then go to Wendy. So Nancy, let's go to you first. I believe you're still the owner of Abrazo Multicultural Marketing, so your perspective?
I am indeed, thanks Eve. So I want to go back just quickly to what Chaitanya shared. So we do have many adults needing to stay home because childcare isn't available, because school has been remote, because summer school isn't back yet, because there might be new responsibilities and burdens in the home because of health and economic impact of the pandemic. And unfortunately, no business is immune to this. Small businesses are not immune to this. So that is something we need to be aware of in our efforts to grow and support entrepreneurship. Businesses in our urban economic corridors are also feeling the constraints and capacity due to labor shortages. While our urban small businesses might have trust of the community, which is an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to hiring, they also don't have the same benefit structure or pay scales as their larger corporate counterparts. And this is a red flag for me. We need to, and I'm bringing back this word, we need to be intentional about not just supporting and growing Latino and African American owned businesses, but also how do we help them thrive and not be in a position of further disadvantage if the system is lined up that way. If we aren't intentional about things, we will see, unfortunately, the logical outcome of that, and that will put our communities further back. but we do have the opportunity to treat this as an opportunity and help our businesses not plug a hole, but have the infrastructure, the financial health, and plan to compete. And then I think that leads us to collectively growing the economic pie for the region, which I believe is a goal we all share.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Ugo, as owner of Diamond Disc International, your insights on this?
Definitely, and these are some great points from this esteemed panel. It really makes me think about something that's really resonated with me over the past 8 months, 10 months through this pandemic. And it may go against the grain with what some of you may have heard or believe, but the word pivot, as a lot of people that know me over the past several months, it's become a pet peeve for me. So if every one of you can take that word pivot and just take a red marker and circle it and draw a line through it, and in your mind, replace that word with evolve or evolution. And I just really think that when you look at all the major industries, they've all changed. Whether the industry was in 2021 or 2022, the reality is going to be different than what it was in 2019 or 2018. They've all changed, whether you're talking about healthcare, manufacturing, and we can dive deeper, construction, infrastructure, education. And a lot of the comments that were being made earlier by, again, great points, really was just, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, because it just really made it that point resonate with me to say that I have to mention it. When you look at, historically, so we look at Blockbuster. I always talk about the Blockbuster story. I think some people here can remember back to when Blockbuster was what everybody did on a Friday, was that Blockbuster disappeared. And why did it disappear? Due to convenience. And when you look at a lot of the giants in business that came about, especially on the commerce side, was because of convenience. Amazon, the list goes on. But now, when you look at how every industry, you can't go to any industry that hasn't been touched by health and safety being a major concern. And followed up by health and safety is innovation. So when I say that is for a business owner, entrepreneur, corporation, employee, looking at how have all these industries evolved. You can't look at, it's not going to go back to where it was. What are you doing as a business owner? What are you doing as an employee to understand not just that company, but where that industry is going? What are you doing as a business owner to own that industry, where it's going? When you look at manufacturing has been outsourced for so many years, and the research and development aspect was kept here. But what they found out was that other countries became better at manufacturing because in that process of manufacturing, guess what? Development happens, innovation happens. You start doing things differently. Right now, because of health and safety concerns, America never wants to be in a position again where we have to rely upon other countries for manufacturing. So I see manufacturing coming back in a huge way in America, but not as it was before in the past, with innovation stepping in. Look at construction, look at healthcare. When you look at education, I think whether you're in 2022 or 2023, or 5 years down the road, when they're looking at a school and evaluating that school, somewhere in their thought process, evaluation process will say, what do you have in place just in case a pandemic may happen? What do you have in place for remote learning opportunities? Where if you're an employee going to an organization, you're going to be thinking about what do you have in place for health and safety? So kind of circling back, as a business owner, yes, as a business owner, you have a right to have in place to make sure that you are safe, your employees are safe, and what are you doing moving forward to address those concerns just equally as an employee coming in has those same type of concerns. But I think when you're looking at every industry, how you're addressing that, how the industry looks, you look at food and beverage. Obviously, Giacomo can speak a lot more about that. When you look at entertainment, you look at movies. I used to be, Fridays, there's weekends, taking the family to the movies was, something that happened at least once a month, if not once every other month. Now you have HBO Max Plus and Disney Plus and something else plus. So, for us, because of health and safety concerns, normally a Friday afternoon, we're at home, microwave popcorn and seeing which movie's on this for the weekend. So I mentioned all these roundabout stories to mention, and obviously we'll be going back to the movie theaters soon, but I mentioned that to say, as a business owner, entrepreneur, you have to be cognizant of where the industry is going. Do not be led astray in thinking that your industry is going to revert back to where it was before in the past. And if you haven't started having that conversation or that thought process, thinking about where the industry is going, and start having employees that you're looking at coming aboard that are going to make your company more successful moving forward, not where it was before in the past, then you might be yourself in a precarious predicament. But don't pivot, evolve.
Excellent. Thank you, Ugo. Great nuggets. Wendy, from a big picture view, since you work with all entrepreneurs, what's your take?
Well, I would say that we really all have to get real. No one knows. The world changed. The world entirely changed from the health crisis that everybody knows about to some extent, the economic crisis because of the health crisis, and then certainly in the United States, the social justice crisis. So no one really knows. We really need to chew over it over some excellent hot Palermo's pizza and cold Miller Lite. And I say that in a funny way, but really, we don't all know. So great comments from the panelists. Nobody has a crystal ball, but I think that, really the world has changed. And I can see just in the reflection of the 70-some staff members we have at WIBIC, some people rose to the occasion, good majority held, and some people had a really hard time with it. But I think everybody, to some extent, had a moment to reflect in a different way. So will the prognosis and the trend be that 40% of the workforce will change jobs? I don't know. I'm seeing a few at WIBIC, some for good reasons, some for not even sure in some cases. But, I think there will be some floating around of different jobs. But I think everybody has had a moment to really reflect on their own lives. And sort of my theory is that I think that people are going to bet more on themselves. And that might be, as Shaitania mentioned, or someone else mentioned, that might be about not even necessarily formal education, but additional education or skill building to bet on themselves further, be it with and within workforce and industry and business or what have you, or vocation, or be it to start your own business. So I think there's just going to be this sense of a little bit more about self and a little bit more about betting on self as an employee, as a member of an organization, or starting a business. In terms of entrepreneurship, our pipeline has never been as full at WIBIC in terms of deals, in terms of interest in getting loans. In 2020, we saw, in 2019, we had 5,100 unduplicated clients. In 2020, when we had a flip, not pivot, but we had a evolve for Mr. Ugo in March, from having tons of our training being on ground, evenings and weekends, pay what you can afford, I thought, I don't know if that many people are going to come to classes. Instead, we grew about 15, 20%, 5,500 unduplicated clients came to entrepreneurial programming at WIBIC last year in 2021, and we're already seeing that the first half of this year. So there is definitely a keen interest there. If we look at past economic crises, this again, mind you, was 3 crises in my mind: a health crisis, a social justice crisis, and an economic crisis. When we look at in past economic crises, we see that entrepreneurship increases. It then levels out a little bit. But for those that maybe, again, lost a job or displaced or did not like how an employer worked with them during this economic crisis, they go, I can do this. I know accounting skills. I'll put out my own shingle. I have this piece, I'll do this part-time. And so there's some transition too around entrepreneurship in times of really a big global crisis. But I think entrepreneurship is here to stay. And I think, again, entrepreneurship is a way, a little bit more of really betting on self and believing in self. And in really unsure times, that might have a great deal of safety for people.
Thank you, Wendy. So when I look at your comments, Nancy talked about small businesses having the full constraints of that worker shortage and the impact that it really makes on small businesses, and again, being intentional on helping our businesses thrive and using this time as an opportunity through some collective efforts. Ugo was very clear: get rid of pivot. It is now time to evolve. and, really taking a very honest look at whether we have evolved both as an organization and as employees. And then Wendy saying, get real. We don't really know. And yeah, we can all meet at Palermo's, everyone, for pizza, beer, soda. Because we do have to continue to reflect and look at what's occurring, and that there is more confidence in people betting on themselves. I really like that term. And, the crisis of health, social justice, and economic injustice. So I'm actually going to skip the last question that we have because we're running out of time, and I'd really like to have an opportunity for us to look in the chat box and at least grab a couple of questions or thoughts that have come from those attending today. But meanwhile, thanks, panelists. You all have been phenomenal in terms of your perspectives, your insights, your solutions, just from your own day-to-day work in employment and entrepreneurship. So let's go to the chat box. Do we have anything? We have Maura Fitzgerald, who's our Education Support Coordinator, checking the box.
Dr. Hall, we do not have any questions in the box at this time.
No, it was that powerful, you all. You have left our audience speechless? Okay. Well, why don't we just do this? Let's just go around and have just final comments from each of you on what we discussed today and what might be that final word that you would like to leave with our attendees today, which I understand it's about 150, 160 that attended today. So why don't we start with you, Stephen? You were our sponsor, and again, thank you so much.
First of all, thank you for hosting this, and I will also say thank you for the panelists. I probably got more out of this than I gave. I will say my parting thoughts is, this is an opportunity for us to pause and figure out what's next. And I encourage everyone that if you're going through the trauma, if you're going through kind of what's next for you, if you're going through how do I move forward, take this time to figure this out. Let's be careful that, I've said this a couple times within my organization, that this doesn't become a moment, but a movement. But that's a personal movement for you as well. Just resist the temptation of going back to pre-pandemic days and understand what you went through, what you evolved into. I'm using Hugo's word, what you evolved into, and what's next for you. So really take this opportunity. So if it's coming back to corporate America, or it's going out and realizing that dream that you never thought you had the ability to do so, cultivate that dream and move forward and make whatever's next work for you.
Thank you, Stephen. And again, thank you for being our sponsor today. Nancy, give us those final words from what you're seeing, and thank you again for your leadership with the Hispanic Collaborative as an entrepreneur and just all the things you've been doing across our community.
Thanks, Eve, and I always appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with your organizations and others in the community. I think that through collaboration, we can really make some things happen that none of us could do on our own, so thanks for that opportunity. What I will leave you with is a quote that I really enjoy, which says, "Adversity does not build character, it reveals it." And I want to share that quote because of what we've gone through, but where we need to continue to go. Our Hispanic and African American communities are 70% or more of our essential workers that have gotten us through the pandemic, that have ensured playing that instrumental role in securing the necessities for all Americans during this time frame, from the fields to the hospitals to everywhere in between. They have played that role. And so I think that we need to think about that, and how do we buckle in for the long haul now and ensure that we are setting up current and next generations for success, to better support and catalyze the changes and transformations that need to happen in our Black and Brown communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Shaitani, I want to go to you and just also thank you so much for your leadership at Employ Milwaukee. You've been on the staff. You have all the insights. You were working from a state level, and for you to come back and be at the helm of Employ Milwaukee, it's very important to our city. And just want to thank you for all the work. I learned a lot about what is occurring in my colleagues' shop down the street. So your final words.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful panel. I've too, as Stephen stated, gained a lot. I've worked with a number of folks that's on the panel, but really just being part of this panel and having that conversation. And I just want to reflect on, I remember when I took the job, I started March 16th, and it was kind of the day that the world shut down. And many people were like, well, how come you're not panicking? And I looked at it from the perspective that I wasn't in this by myself, that the whole world was in this same situation. So there was no need for me to panic because we were in this together and we were going to figure it out together. And that's where we are. We're back and we're uncomfortable because, as Wendy mentioned, we don't know. This is a whole new space for us to be in. But while we're in this uncomfortable place, we got to get uncomfortable a little bit in order for us to get back comfortable. But we're going to get comfortable in this new space. And let's get away from this notion of wanting to go back pre-pandemic and just really look at, as Hugo said, how we have evolved and where we need to continue to evolve and be open to the change that is before us. Be open to doing business different, not business as usual, but business different. And that's on every front, because whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a for-profit business, whether you're an individual or you're part of a group, we all have had to make change, and we're still making change. And we're a little bit unnerved because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, but we're in this together and we will come out of this together. And we just have to continue to focus on partnerships, collaborations, be open, even when it doesn't make sense to us. And even when our brains can't even fathom that suggestion or potential solution, let's be open to the potential innovation behind it and what it means for how we move forward. So I'm just, I just look at things from a perspective of how do we take the impossible and make it possible? Because we got to believe that it is in order for it to be.
Thank you for those words of encouragement to all of us, Shaitania. Thank you. Ugo, I've known you for quite some time, since I was actually my other job running the African American Chamber, so I have watched you grow your business. So just thank you for what you've done in your business and for the leadership that you've exhibited both on a local level and a state level. So thanks for joining us. Your final words, please.
Well, and thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you, Dr. Hall, for your leadership. Thank you for putting together this great panel. Thank you for the Milwaukee Urban League. And I also have watched you grow as and the amazing things that you've done with your leadership for the African American Chamber of Commerce, and not just what you've done, where you left it and where it's gone as a result, and obviously the amazing things you're doing with the Milwaukee Urban League since you've taken the helm. And also, I want to thank the esteemed panelists. I'm very, very fortunate to be on this panel with most of the panelists I know and worked with before in the past. And I also want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to say, let's make sure, I've worked with a lot of you before in the past, let's make sure that we all continue, as was mentioned earlier by Chaitanya, that we all continue to work together, that there's so much that we can accomplish working together. And thank you, Steve, most of the course, for hosting. Much appreciated for putting together this platform. So I just want to keep it to a quote that I say often throughout this pandemic, where a lot of the chairs that I sit in, or a lot of the tables that I've been at, and I always preface it by saying, and it's a quote. One of you have to tell me where this quote's from, because I'm not sure, but I've used it unapologetically, and I always lead off by saying, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And then normally after I say that, then I normally make some very bold, audacious statements of things that need to change. But I mention that to say, as we talk about not pivoting, we're all aware of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin, again, historically, where we ranked before in the past for diverse businesses, for people of color, family, raised a business, the list goes on. last in a lot of categories that we shouldn't be. And that was before the pandemic. So I mentioned that to say, as most people that know me, I'm always the eternal optimist. This pandemic, as we talked about, shook a lot of things up, but it started having conversation that we should have already been having. Let's use these opportunities to be that audacious, be that bold. And for me, as Dr. Hall knows, in this stage of my career, it's all about my 3 beautiful daughters, princesses at home. What type of world are we going to leave this for them and their friends and our next generation that are coming about? So right now, I say that to say, this is a great opportunity for us to continue working together to make change, evolve, and our role and our positions with how we're leaving this community, this business community, the diverse business community moving forward. So let's continue to evolve and make the change.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you. Wendy, you've been at this for a long time. You have definitely made your mark across race and gender, both locally, statewide, and even internationally. Give us your final words as we very closely wrap up.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. For Shitania, I think that we have to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable ourselves, and we have to help our teams and others with that. And it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. People say, I love change. No, they don't. They don't like change. And so we need to help them with that because things do change. Second, while I think research is really important, we got lots of research. We need more action. We need action on the research we have, the gaps, the disparities, the inequities. We need action. Got to try things. Some's going to work, some's not going to work. We have to try things and be okay with trying it and say it didn't work. Now we're going to try it again. We can pilot things. We can try it out small, taste it, smell it, see if it works, and then see this has merit. Let's take it to the next level. And then one of my favorite expressions to close is do what you can with what you got, where you can go. And I try to do that every day.
Love it, Wendy. Thank you. And Giacomo, you are going to wrap us up. We will be to Palermo's later on this evening to debrief. But anyway, Giacomo, you have done some phenomenal things. You know, I love Operation Dream and just your commitment to young people around mentoring and, you know, entrepreneurship, employment, et cetera. So give us your final words. I've enjoyed getting to know you over these last several years.
Oh, sure. Well, Dr. Hall, thank you so much. I'm honored to have been invited. And the panel was just great. And I think the thing that I guess I want to say is that I was really inspired today. And that inspiration is really great because number one, I think my comments are, and Wendy, I didn't steal this from you, but I have number one, take action. All of us on this call, there's action to be taken, and that's where it starts. So I would encourage you all to do that. And the second thing I guess I would say is, and this is for the business community, and is that we need to allow ourselves to be challenged and to be held accountable. And someone mentioned earlier a scorecard, and it's something that I had raised several months ago. It may not be a popular thing, but you know, putting a scorecard together for us to be measured, I think is something that I would embrace, and I would encourage the rest of the business community and for the organizations in Milwaukee to help us to put that scorecard together to say, are we the best we can be and how can we get better? So it's been great being on the panel. Thank you so much, Dr. Hall, again. And I'm open to anyone, whoever wants to contact me with any ideas, any entrepreneurs, reach out to me, please.
All right. Well, thank you to those who joined us today out there in our audience, to our distinguished panelists who are my colleagues and friends. And again, a special thanks to our sponsor, Molson Coors Beverage Company. Today's town hall will be featured on the Milwaukee Urban League's website, so you can see it again and again and again, along with additional questions and answers from our panelists. I think the information today was so valuable. The next State of Black America MKE Part 2 will be in December of this year. Meanwhile, please visit tmul.org for additional information on employment, education, and empowerment programs and services at the Milwaukee Urban League, as well as upcoming events. Working together, we are hope in action. I'm Dr. Eve M. Hall. Until next time, have a wonderful day.